Alright, so you should already have your journal and calculator out on your desk. Why don't you go ahead and get your pouch as well, because you will need your calculator, or sorry, your highlighter. As you already are working on your warm-up, because that bell rang, you should also have your name tag out on your desk, and your syllabus parent homework is turned into the homework hotspot. And keep any supplies out on your desk. Miss Osborne will come around and collect those. And check your name off, as well as the syllabus and the parent homework. So go ahead and start working on your warm-up for today. Again, it could just be on the back of the page that we finished up on. So yesterday we talked about the concepts. I always just put the warm-up on the back. So you can do that on the inside cover if you wish. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. First of all, the question was, what does PEMDAS and GEMS stand for? To explain, I want you to turn to someone near you or who you're sitting with and go ahead and talk about that for about 30 seconds. Okay, what you should have discussed was PEMDAS was something that you guys learned probably in 5th grade, 4th grade, and then we converted the PEMDAS into GEMS. It means the same thing, it's just order of operations and the way that we should solve things. So for PEMDAS we have parentheses, exponents. The M and the D stand for multiplication and division, doesn't matter what order, and then the A for addition and S for subtraction is again in no specific order. We converted that to GEMS just because as we get into more algebraic ways of solving things, we turn that P, which is parentheses, into a G, which stands for our grouping symbols. Okay, we're going to talk about different types of grouping symbols you might not have seen before that you will recognize in algebra. Okay, if we continue, E is exponents. M is for multiplication and division, and S is for subtraction and addition. Okay, so again, we just use this terminology to keep track of our order of operations when solving equations. So let's go ahead and use GEMS to solve the second warm-up question. Okay, we have -2 with these things, and then 6 plus 3 parentheses 8 minus 4. Okay, I said these things because these might be new to you. What these are called are brackets. Okay, this is a type of grouping symbol that we could see along with parentheses. And when it comes to our grouping symbols, we have to solve that first because that's our G. So I have two grouping symbols, parentheses and brackets. So in this case, I'm going to have to solve the innermost grouping symbol first. So I'm going to go ahead, and the innermost grouping symbol is what's in parentheses here, 8 minus 4. So everything else I recopy down. Okay, in algebra it's very, very important you show step by step and show all of your work. So I'm going to copy everything down. So -2 bracket 6 plus 3, and inside parentheses I can solve 8 minus 4, which gives me 4. Okay, so I did the first grouping symbol. Now, since the grouping symbol is simplified to one thing, I'm done. Now I have to solve what's inside of the brackets. So if I look at what's inside the brackets, I have 6 plus 3. What operation falls between the 3 and the 4? Okay, it should be multiplication. So I have addition and multiplication. If I look at GEMS, the next thing I need to follow is the multiplication. So the 6 falls down, the plus falls down, and 3 times 4 would be 12. Okay, the next step is, again, I want to simplify what's in this grouping symbol. So I'm going to go ahead and recopy it over here. I need to add 6 plus 12, which is 18. Okay, once I simplified everything down to one number, my next step is to get rid of those brackets. And this is very similar to what we talked about yesterday. is the operation between -2 and 18 is multiplication here. So my answer ends up being -2 times 18 is -36.
So for the 10,
Okay, the next warm-up question, number 3, is a little bit different. Okay, I have these bars here, which are absolute value bars, x plus 4 plus 9 divided by 2, and it says for x is equal to -3. In this case, what they're telling us is whenever there's an x in the expression, we need to substitute -3 in place for the x. We talked about this yesterday as one of our mini concepts. Whenever I substitute a number in place of a variable, I need to put that in parentheses. So, let's go ahead and fill in what we know. Here's the absolute value bar, and we'll talk about that in a second. X is really -3, so I'm going to put that in parentheses. Okay, I'm going to add the plus 9, all divided by 2. So my next step here is looking at the grouping symbols. Okay, in this case it's the absolute value bar. I need to simplify everything in there to one number. Okay, so let's do that first. I know -3 plus 4 gives me a +1. So I'm going to copy everything else down. And this is what I have so far. I'm going to make my absolute value a little bolder. So from here, these absolute value bars, it's simplified, but I need to ask myself a question. Absolute value bars mean how many units away from 0 it really is. So 1 is really 1 unit away from 0. So once you ask that question, how many units away is this number inside the bars away from 0, the bars drop. Now, my next step is to simplify. Okay, from here, I can add 1 plus 9, which is 10. And the last step here is dividing by 2, so your answer here is 5. Okay, so those are my two answers for this. We're going to talk about all of this today. So what I want you to do is, on the next page of your journal, I want you to go ahead and head it GEMS / absolute value / substitution. And today is August 24th, 2016. And this is going to be page 3 in my journal. Now, remember, we want to keep track of our table of contents. So that's something I never do good every year. Once you have that headed, okay, go ahead in your table of contents. For GEMS absolute value, I added substitution, and this is page 3 for me. I never had or numbered the warm-up pages, but that's up to you. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So first of all, let's talk about GEMS. We talked about this during our warm-up today, but we need to make sure we understand it. G stands for our grouping symbols. E stands for our exponents. M is multiplying and dividing. And S is subtraction and addition. That is what GEMS stands for. Grouping symbols, exponents, multiplying, dividing, and subtraction and addition. Now, like I told you in algebra, we're going to see different types of grouping symbols, not just parentheses that you have seen in the past. So let's write down some of the grouping symbols that you need to be familiar with. First grouping symbol are the parentheses. Second one that we saw in warm-ups are brackets. Another one we saw in warm-up are absolute value bars. They're just bold. Another one that might be new to you, you see it in English class a lot. They look like paragraph symbols. These are called braces. And the last one is our square root symbol, but mathematically it's called a radical sign. So we have 5 types of grouping symbols. We should be familiar with about 2 or 3 of them, but some of them might be new to us as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into this, since this should be review for you. Okay, so let's do this first one. Copy down the same example as me. I have 5 squared plus 2 in parentheses, and then 6 minus 3 in parentheses, all over 3 plus 2. So, according to GEMS, I need to look at those grouping symbols first. I have 2 pairs of grouping symbols. I have 2 sets of parentheses. So let's go ahead and solve what's inside of those parentheses first. So 5 squared is an exponent. Something squared means that number times itself. So 5 squared is 25, plus 2 I'm going to copy down. And then I'm just going to recopy 6 minus 3, all over 3 plus 2. Okay, from here I can still simplify what's in the parentheses. So 25 plus 2 is 27. 6 minus 3 is 3. And it's still all over 3 plus 2. Now, from this step right here, I could simplify it a little bit more, but before we do that, I want to talk about this fraction bar, and you'll hear me say that a lot, especially when we get into exponent rules. Okay, this fraction bar has a numerator and a denominator, and whenever it has a fraction bar, I want to make sure that I simplify the top to one number and the bottom to one number, and then I'm going to divide. So let's write down the steps. The first step is I'm going to simplify the numerator. Then I'm going to simplify the denominator, and then the last step is I'm going to divide. Okay, so whenever we have a fraction bar with expressions on the top and the bottom, we want to simplify the top, simplify the bottom, and then we divide is our very last step. So, again, the numerator here, I want to simplify this. 27 times 3, because this is multiplication, gives me 81. 3 plus 2 is 5. So I simplified the top, simplified the bottom. And I'm going to go ahead and enter that in my calculator. Welcome to algebra. You could use your calculator on everything. I have 81 divided by 5, and I end up getting 16.2 as my answer. And I am completely finished. So 16.2 would be my answer for this expression using order of operations. Okay, let's try another one that looks like our warm-up. Let's try 2 bracket 3 plus parentheses 5 times 2 and bracket. Okay, so what I notice here is I'm looking for grouping symbols first. How many grouping symbols do I have here? I have 2 grouping symbols. I have the brackets and I have the parentheses. Okay, I want you to put a big star by this. When there is more than one grouping symbol, we want to solve the innermost first. And go ahead and highlight that. So whenever we have more than one grouping symbol in a problem, we want to solve the innermost first, which means the most inside. So for this problem, I'm going to recopy everything I don't need right now. I'm going to solve the parentheses first. That's inside of the bracket, so I need to simplify that first. 5 times 2 here would be 10. Okay, so once I simplify that to one number, now I'm looking at how can I simplify what's in the brackets. So I have 3 plus 10 is 13. And what operation is this right now? I have 2 bracket 13. Okay, it's multiplication, so all I do is multiply 2 times 13, and my answer here would be 26. Okay, so just a couple little things with grouping symbols in our GEMS in algebra. Whenever you have that fraction bar, we're simplifying the top to one number, simplifying the bottom to one number, and then dividing. And then whenever we have more than one grouping symbols, we want to start off by solving the innermost first. Okay, one more before we move on to absolute value. Let's try this. I have 4 minus y squared plus 7 when y is equal to 3. Okay, so they give me an expression here. This time we have a variable, but they tell us that the variable represents this quantity. Remember, we talked about our mini concept yesterday. Whenever there's substitution, we want to substitute this number in place for any y that's in the expression. So go ahead and put another star here and write down that we are going to substitute a number for a variable using parentheses. Always, always, always. We have to use parentheses. That's huge when we get into exponent rules. So if I have this problem, whenever there's a y, I have to put a 3 in place of it. So 4 is fine. I'm going to bring down that subtraction sign. I'm going to substitute a 3 in parentheses for the y value. That's squared, and I'm going to bring down the plus 7. Now, from here, I substituted, so that's done. Now I'm looking for grouping symbols. There's really none because it's already simplified. So the next thing is our exponents. Now you can, anything squared is that number times itself. So 3 squared would be 9. If you aren't sure about that, though, you can plug in your calculator. Okay, if you notice, the parentheses buttons are right above the 8 and the 9. So go ahead and push the left parentheses. We're going to put 3 in the parentheses, so it looks like this. And then the squared button, if you look on the left side, the 5th one down where it says x squared, push that and it should look like this. 3 squared, push enter, and you get 9. Okay, so I have 4 minus 9 plus 7. Okay, from here I'm just solving. So I did my grouping symbols, there were none. Exponents just took care of that. Multiplication and division, is there any? No. So now I'm going to subtract or add. Since that's all I have left over, I'm going to just go from left to right. So 4 minus 9. Again, I'm going to use my calculator. 4 minus 9 to double check is -5. That makes sense. If I have $4, I owe someone 9, I still owe them 5. Copy everything else down. And then -5 plus 7. Now the way you enter this in is the negative sign is really underneath the 3. So click that. -5 plus 7. It should look like this on your calculator. Push enter. And my answer here is 2. Which again makes sense. If I owe someone $5, I give them 7, I should get 2 back. Okay, so that's just a couple more things that we need to remember when dealing with GEMS. Let's move on to the absolute value, because that could be something new or just a good refresher from this summer. Okay, so absolute value, what is that? Okay, that is the distance that the number is away from 0, And one also I want you to write down is put a star that whenever I take away those bars, my answer is going to be positive. When I drop the bars, the number coming out of it will be positive. Okay, so let's take a look at some examples. Let's take the absolute value of -7 plus 5. Okay, so again, absolute value bars are considered grouping symbols, so I need to simplify what's inside. So -7 plus 5 gives me the absolute value of -2. Once I simplified everything down to one number, you ask yourself this question: how many spaces away is -2 from 0? Well, my answer here would be it's 2 spaces away from 0, so 2 would be my answer. Okay, how I teach my on-level kids is act as if you're in jail, so the bars represent jail. Now you could go in as a positive person or a negative person, depending on what happened. But when you leave jail, or I drop my bars, you should end up being a positive person when you come out. So that's why that always helps me remember that it's always positive. Okay, now this could be a little different though. If there's a negative sign on the outside of the absolute value of -2, okay, that's going to change the answer just a little bit. Again, I simplify what's in here. The absolute value of -2 is a +2, but that negative still is in front. So I always think, well, what number is really standing in front of that absolute value? It's really -1. So when I drop the bars, my answer here is +2, but the next step I have to do is multiply that -1 times 2, which ends up being -2 is my answer. We'll talk more about that. You'll get used to that a little bit more later on. Okay, let's try this one. Let's have 2 absolute value bars of -7 minus 3. Okay, inside of the bars I need to simplify, so I could keep it, change it, or I can use my calculator. Again, negative symbol is down here, -7 minus 3. Push enter, I get -10. So I have 2 absolute value bars with -10. Since I simplified that down to one number, I asked myself how many units away is 10 from 0, -10 from 0, and that answer is a +10. And the last thing I do is multiply 2 times 10, which is 20. Just follow it step by step. Okay, last example. Let's take the absolute value of 4 plus 7, and it's going to be squared on the outside of the absolute value. Okay, I'm going to simplify what's inside of the bars. So 4 plus 11 plus 7 is 11. I asked myself how many spaces away is 11 from 0, and that drops the bars to a +11. This time it's squared though, so once I drop the bars I can now figure out the exponent. 11 squared is 11 times 11, which is 121. Okay, so you'll be seeing a little bit of this on your homework today, so make sure you have these notes written down correctly. And the last thing that we're going to talk about today is, I gave you the numerical expression here. Sometimes on the EOC, which the EOC stands for our end of course that you'll be taking in May, it's similar to your STAR test. In middle school and elementary they call it a STAR test. In high school it's considered your EOC. They might give you a problem that's just verbal. So it could say this: the product of 12 and the sum of -2 and 6. This is the verbal expression, and we're going to change it to numerical. So if I look at the verbal term here, I have product of 12 and sum of -2 and 6. I'm going to look at this and I want to write it numerically, which means there's only numbers, operations, and variables at some time. So let's look at the words we know. First of all, this word should pop out to you. The product. What's the definition of a product? In math, this would be considered the answer to a multiplication problem. So I know I need to have multiplication when I write this out. Another word that sticks out to me is sum. What does sum mean? Okay, sum is the answer to an addition problem. So I know when I write this out, I need to have at least multiplication, addition. I need to have 12 in there, -2, and 6. So if I think about this, the sum of -2 and 6, that means I have to add those two together to get an answer. So I'm going to put that in parentheses, -2 plus 6. I need to add those two together to get the sum. Now what about product of 12 and the sum? Well, if this in parentheses represents the sum, the product of 12 and the sum would be, I'm multiplying 12 times what was in parentheses. This is your answer right here. I just changed it from the verbal to a numerical expression. Okay, other words that you may see is quotient. Okay, in this case, what's quotient mean? Quotient is the answer to a division problem. And the only other one that we are missing is the difference. And the difference represents the answer to a subtraction problem. So you're going to get a little bit more practice on that today as well. Okay, so what you're going to be doing now is you will be given a card, a green card that's either the verbal expression or the numerical expression, and you are going to find your partner that has the one that matches with you when Miss Osborne says go. Okay, the class with the quickest time of getting all of the cards matched up will get a party point. So Miss Osborne will explain that to you now, and you guys will take time to do that. And then when you're finished with that, Miss Osborne will play the video again, and we're going to start our homework. I want to set it up with you so you understand how I want your work shown. So go ahead and pause the video. Okay, so what you need for your homework is going to be your notebook. Obviously, take that home every day with you. You're going to need a piece of paper, the extra pieces of paper on the bookshelf in the front. This is how you're going to head every single paper that you have in my class.
Right here?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're going to fold the paper in half just to conserve paper. You're going to start solving problems on the left side and then continue on the right side. When you head your paper, your name is on the top line. Don't put the word name, put your first and last name. The assignment goes under that, so you're going to get the assignment in a second, but it's 1-6 practice B. Today's date goes in the top right. It's 8/24/2016. And then underneath that is the period that you are in / Friday. So just in case if you lose the paper and someone finds it, they'll know where to take it. Okay, so that's how we're heading our papers in every single assignment that we have. It needs to be in pencil and it has to be on loose leaf paper, or I will not accept it. Okay, so you're going to be receiving this paper in a second. We're going to do the first one together. I like to do that so you know what I expect. The directions for 1 through 6 say, simplify each expression, show work on a separate piece of paper. So let's do number 1 together. Go ahead and put number 1. We're going to recopy the problem. 18 minus 12 plus 4 squared. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and simplify using gems. So again, I'm going to write gems up at the top. Grouping symbols, there's no grouping symbols here, so I'm going to go to the next thing. E stands for exponents. So exponents, 4 squared, I can take care of that. I'm recopying everything I don't use. So 18 minus 12 falls down. 4 squared here is 16. Okay, exponents taken care of. Next step's multiplication. I'm not multiplying here at all. So I move on to the next things. S, which is subtraction. But again, that stands for subtraction and addition. So I'm just going to go from left to right. 18 minus 12 is 6. And then I'm going to add 16 to that, which gives me the answer as 22. I'm going to circle my answer. You can highlight it as well if you wish. Again, this is all in pencil. And I'm going to put my answer back on the paper. So 22 goes on the line for number 1. You'll do that for 1 through 6. You keep looking at the directions. 7 through 10, you're going to evaluate the expression with the given value for the variable. So they tell you the expression, they give you that y is equal to 5. Make sure we use our parentheses when we substitute that in. Again, work in pencil shown on the separate piece of paper. And then 11 through 13, okay, you're writing the verbal, or this is the verbal, you're going to write the numerical expression. Okay, so you don't have to solve these last 3, you're just writing those out. When you turn this in tomorrow, your work needs to be stapled. If it's not stapled to it, then you will get a 0 on your homework because I need to see where you're making mistakes. You're going to staple the front worksheet and then the work on the back, and look at the board in the morning to see where you turn it in, whether it's the hot spot or if it is the tray. And we will see you tomorrow.